Hello, my name is Maria Ayala and I'll be doing a professional development for teachers for Module 1. And the title is going to be My Brain, My Teaching, Our Learning. Now, the goal with this presentation is to use the knowledge that I've gained from the module, create a presentation that is not just about transmitting information to teachers, but to actually have them, first of all, emotionally and cognitively engaged, then to have them apply this information and everything that we're learning here in the regular classroom, to do reflections on themselves as teachers, as people, and to understand how their brains are work, how they are connected and to what they are teaching, and to look at this also from the student's perspective. The next slide is just about explaining what is the content that we're going to be having in this presentation. Like, we're all different, brain plasticity, emotions in the brain, empathy, attention, new neural networks, and what are the takeaways that teachers have. So here we're going to talk with the teachers first of all about meeting their own brains, self-reflection about what do they know about their own brains, how do they learn best. And the goal here is to start talking about the fact that we're all different, that we all have different brains, that we all have different experiences, and for that we learn differently as well. So this is all about the goal that we are all different. Now, what did we learn from the activity before? And how can this knowledge help me become a better person, become a better teacher? With everything that was discussed in small groups and then brainstormed as a group in the activity before. So here is just about doing a closing the idea of the fact that we are all different, that there is not just one teaching style, there's not just one approach, and there's not just one design for all students. And the fact that we need to find different ways for all students. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about what is brain plasticity. And first, we're going to discuss the concept of brain plasticity and the fact that brain plasticity is the ability of the brain to modify its own structure and function following changes within the body or in the external environment. And then here we're going to just share a little bit about reading with half a brain, this experience from this extraordinary man, Brooke Smith, and what is it that after looking at the video, discussing with the teachers, what are the things that they can observe that Brooke is able to do? And using the concept from plasticity, how can we explain all the things that he's able to do from a neuroscience perspective? So using this reflection here, we're going to afterwards think about how to apply this information. So, for example, in Brooke's case, rather than trying hard to learn to do what his brain has trouble doing, Brooke appears instead to have changed how he thinks to suit the brain that he has. So now here we would like for teachers to think about that struggling student in their class and how can we change our thinking to suit his brain, to suit the brain of this student and the learning needs that he might have. And another reflection as well is, how does this knowledge about plasticity help me as a teacher? Like, how could I become better knowing this new concept? And then on the next slide is just giving teachers an opportunity to, again, do a little bit of, okay, so what is brain plasticity? Why is this important? And how can this help me as a teacher? Next, we're going to be talking about emotions in the brain. So, first of all, I would like to engage teachers on an emotional cognitive level again. So they're going to describe in small groups what it was their most meaningful learning experience and why do they think that these experiences were so meaningful for them. So it's also about the emotional impact that these experiences had in themselves and how, because they were so emotionally strong, they are still in their memories repertoire. They're still, they can still be accessed from your memory. And then afterwards, we're also going to do a little discussion about thinking about a moment that you were emotionally stressed and you didn't make a good decision. So it's introducing the fact that emotions are also connected to the decision-making process. And then I'm going to share just this video Professor Abigail Bayard of Vassar College on the research that she made from teenagers about making good choices. And that this evidence suggests that emotions play a really critical role in making good choices. So I really love this video because it was so clear about how emotions are so important in our lives and how we learn as well. So here's just emphasizing again that emotion, memory, and learning, they're all intimately linked together. I mean, we can't talk about one without thinking about the other. So you don't learn if you don't find something meaningful or emotion provoking, because emotions actually heighten our motivation to engage with the material. So if we're just thinking about facts, or we're just thinking about transfer information, or we're just thinking about from teaching and so students can get engaged from our perspective, then we won't be able to engage them on an emotional level, which is actually key for learning. So again, it's just a little reflection, like, do we consider this emotional aspect of learning in our daily teaching? And this is just a self-reflection, so that teachers could be honest to themselves, like, am I using this? Am I considering this emotional aspect in my daily teaching? How is it that I'm using it, and how is it that I'm not using it? At which stages of the day do I usually use it, and in which stages do I actually do not really consider it? And then just to use this reflection and thinking about, again, how to apply this information. Like, meaningful learning requires 3 ingredients. So we have factual knowledge, skilled emotional intuition, like what matters, and then the practical understanding of the content. So teachers should here like consider a skill or a content that they're teaching or that they're going to teach, and to provide examples of, what are the factual learning that they want to transmit to their students. Now, how is it that they can get them emotionally engaged? And what is the practical understanding they need in order to apply this or to understand these concepts? Here is just again about closing out the ideas of emotions and learning, and that emotions are so important in the learning process. So here we're going to be talking a little bit about empathy, and I think that everybody can relate to this picture. So we could talk about either this experience or think about something else, like an experience where you had strong emotions when you saw something or heard that something happened to someone else. What were the thoughts that you had? How did this make you feel? Why do you think that you can still remember this information or this experience from somebody else? And this is introducing empathy. And connecting to empathy, we're going to be talking about mirror neurons. And then we're going to talk about the monkey discovery, like how this researcher, this scientist was having an ice cream, and then from the monkey, he could actually activate those parts of his brain that had to do with tasting and from putting the ice cream into his mouth, because he had that experience before. He had tasted ice cream in the past, and he really enjoyed it. And so it was emotionally significant to see somebody else doing the same thing. And how our emotions are actually these biological reactions that are shaped by our context and our experiences and the learning that we have. But when this scientist did the same thing, putting a pencil into his mouth, these mirror neurons did not activate because the experience wasn't meaningful enough for the monkey. So it seems that this mirror activation requires shared understanding of the goal implicit in the actions that are being observed. And here we're introducing again not just empathy, but understanding the goal of the action. So if we have goals and plans, those are the ones that are guiding our actions. So if people do not recognize that another's actions are goal-directed, then these simulations will not be activated and the intended learning may not occur. So learners should understand the teacher's goal, and this emotional relevance, but also teachers should understand the students' goals and their emotional relevance as well. So just, think about a content or skill that you're teaching. Now, as for the teacher, what is your goal as a teacher? How could your students really understand these goals? What do you think your students' goals are? How could you find out or help them discover their own goals regarding this skill or this content? Because goals are not imposed; they are discovered. They are from us. They are from within us. So we need to discover them. We need to make them tangible. We need to make them concrete. Now, why is this emotionally relevant for your students to understand? Like, why does this content or skill really matter? How could you help your students discover this? So here is just an opportunity to close the idea behind empathy and everything that we had discussed before. Now we're going to be talking about attention. Now, what is attention? Like, how do you know that right now you are paying attention? How do you know whether you're not paying attention? What is your body doing? What is your mind doing? What are the things that you are paying attention or not paying attention to? And what does your brain need to do in order to pay attention? And now we're going to be discussing just the concept of attention, that it is a neural mechanism that helps the brain filter information and that it enhances our sensitivity to things that are important, but reduces our sensitivity to distractions, and that it cannot necessarily be controlled. So I really like this picture about that we could discuss with the teachers about what did they need to do in order to identify each one of the objects that are there, and then how could they see it as a whole. So we're going to be talking about very explicit details and then implicit details as well, because that way we're going to be introducing the next slide about the fact that learning is a process, and that this process implies for us to get information from our senses, and that this information and becomes mental representations that are actually called memories in our minds. And that what is so powerful about the learning is that even though those stimuli may not be there right away for us to access, this information, these mental representations, these memories can actually be accessed, recalled, and manipulated, so we can use this information afterwards. And that attention has a really big role in here, because those attention networks play a role, because these networks determine whether the streams of sensory information we can access to, which are the streams of sensory information that we can access to use in building those new memories. Now, there is, so using this concept of attention, and I really like this picture as well, like increases our awareness of some things, but it decreases our awareness of other things. So having the teachers to think about a student who has a hard time paying attention to your goal focus of that lesson. But what do they do? Now think about from their perspective. What do they pay attention to? Now what are their strengths then? This way we can introduce the next reflection, like we can actually improve achievement for all students regardless of their neurological predisposition. Because some might have more predisposition to details, but then the other ones may have more predisposition for our holistic parts, for the whole field, for the whole view, for the whole visual field. So how can we transform these difficulties into an advantage for learning? How can we change a task to help them perform better or demonstrate their strengths, and so that they could provide specific details in sharing those ideas? And then here, just again, as a closure for what is attention, what does it involve, why is that important for us to consider the term attention, and how can we use this term to help all students, to respect our students' individual attention skills, and to help them be successful in the classroom. And then in the next one, we're going to be talking about new neural networks, about learning itself. So everybody really, most people have the experience of riding a bike. How did we learn to ride a bike? Who taught us? How many times did we fall? How much time did we need to learn how to ride a bike? Why did you learn it in this? Why did we learn to ride a bike in the first place? And this is just, a little bit of reflection about each one of these questions, because afterwards we're going to be talking about, okay, so how did we learn to ride a bike? Is because there were new neural networks that were built. And these networks were built because the experience was meaningful. It was emotionally relevant, and we could actually internalize those skills. So that's why the learning happened. And that what needed to happen was we needed time. Some people learn to ride the bike easily, really fast. Some really take some time to do it. And then we really needed to understand the process. And it mattered to us. It was important for us. And that it also it entailed for us to be active and to be persevere. So then thinking about who taught us, like how much time did we need? Then here we can introduce again about, I'm not introducing because I know a lot of teachers know about scaffolding, but just as a reminder that of Vygotsky's theory of zone of proximal development, and what does the scaffolding really imply, and that scaffolding is a learning process as well, and that it entails for us to be that we need to scaffold. It means that we need to invest time. We must be active, we must persevere, we need to invest a lot of time in working the skills that we would like for our students to do independently afterwards. And that it's an effort because it needs repeated trips over and over those same networks in order to consolidate them so that we can access them later. Because if we don't go over those trips, like repetition and practice, then we won't be able to access them in the future. And that being told to do it is not the same thing as learning. It implies this active and perseverance and repetition and involvement from the students in order for actual learning to really happen. Now, how many times did we fall? We could use this analogy as well with falling from our bikes, with regression. Now, regression is not failure. And I like this statement about that it's a critical component of building and rebuilding skills. So because learning, it's dynamic. It's not like ladder. It's more like a network. And it implies more about building new networks. And that regression or performance that is typically misinterpreted as failure is inevitable. And it's necessary for learning. And I just wrote down here, like, if you would like to see a little bit more about the dynamic skill theory that talks about this network, and it talks about how learning really builds from one stage to the other, that they could talk a little bit more, they could do more research, but we weren't going to cover it here because we don't have the time to do it, all of it. And then on the next slide is just, covering again and talk about what are the new neural networks, why are they important, why is learning so important for the process of teaching, and what are these components of regression and perseverance, why are all of these concepts so important for our teaching, daily teaching. And just a little bit of reflection about what do you think was our goal with this professional development, like them as well, to activate that reflection piece on not just, okay, when I teach, then I want my students to know my goals. No, starting from right now, what do you think was our goal here? Why were these topics so important? And what are some things that you have learned about yourself and about your learning process? And then as well, just, what are 3 takeaways that you could take now? Using all of this information, how could you apply this knowledge in your classroom? And be very specific about how would you use this information to use it in your classroom, like tomorrow. What is something you're going to consider starting tomorrow? And then just to appreciate everybody for paying attention and for being part of this workshop. And I hope that it has satisfied their expectations. So thank you.